There is a deeper reason why people love queens but aspire to baddie culture. Baddie culture is just the masculine energy disguising itself or projecting itself as feminine by deconstructing the elements that masculinity supports and morphing into an idealized version of that. But there's a reason why we deeply love queens. We love and see queens as a natural manifestation of high vibrational feminine energy, one wherein one's passions and emotional life force is their guiding beacon in life. The desire to be deeply connected to your passions and living through your passions, as well as living from a baseline energy of love, is the essence of feminine energy. In contrast, the essence and the basis of high vibrational masculine energy is security. So with love as a baseline of femininity and a connection to your emotional body, fear is derived from the mind or the masculine. So to be disconnected from your feminine energy is just another way of saying being disconnected from your emotional gifts, your emotional purpose or sense of reasoning. Emotional reasoning equals resonance. So as we go through a list of high vibrational divine feminine energy, we will do so by looking through the stages of the feminine experience. And then we'll also look at a particular feminine and how this is illustrated in their discography or life or projects. Some of these examples will also be masculine dominant feminines, just to show how the feminine process exists for each polarity. There are two stages that I've identified as your introduction to your feminine world or your emotional world as a human. Those two stages are the dichotomy between passion and power, and then one's relationship to the masculine. So we are going to use Hayley Williams of Paramore to talk about the passion and power complex. To be feminine embraced is really just understanding the wounding that comes along with the realizations of being in the physical world, particularly when you naturally lead with love. So, in other words, pain is as synonymous with growth as positive results are. And these realizations typically come about when you first start to observe the light and dark behaviors of human beings. Understanding what it means to love other people and to experience or witness love, as well as seeing the fractured way that human beings are actually existing. This usually comes about during childhood trauma, but you don't start to emotionally connect to that until later in life or later in your feminine journey. So, songs that particularly touch on the concept of darkness and navigating loss, but from a standpoint of emotional strength by releasing instead of suppressing that emotional energy, by simply creating emotional expression is the first step in impacting your feminine energy, and we see that throughout Paramore's discography. One of the reasons why this music connects with so many people is because it is compassionately connecting to the emotional experience of self and others from a lens of self-acceptance and forgiveness, as opposed to self-pity for one's experience, but doing so while acknowledging the pain of the experience. This is another way of moving through energy as opposed to bypassing it. And then comes expanding that compassion beyond self-forgiveness to others with songs like We Are Broken and so many others. And I believe this song was written about victims of human, if you know what I mean. So it's the reclaiming of sensuality through raw expression. And that's another key element in connecting to your feminine energy. If you are disconnected from your sensuality because of pain or because of your fear response to experiencing pain, you won't be able to move through to brighter energy or brighter times. Thus, the essence of Paramore and the Queen, Hayley Williams. Here is a random list of well-known feminines that people probably perceive as very, very feminine, but are actually masculine dominant women. I started with these two because I've spoken about them and I'm not going to go into detail about them, but you're going to start to notice a trend amongst these women as we start to talk about some of the characteristics that are dead giveaways for me. And I just want to know in the comments if you see the trend before I say it.
Now, some people think that being a masculine dominant person is directly correlated to your natal chart or your sun sign. But even with these two, we have a Libra and a Scorpio, one with a masculine sun sign and one with a feminine sun sign. So with that knowledge, you can already tell that that doesn't have much to do with it, and it's all about a resonance. A lot of these women are very root chakra focused. They carry this sort of inherent self-confidence, but we'll get into whether it is inflated or not, because with many of them it is. It's very ego-based. And as we rapidly just kind of go through this list, you will start to see the same ego-based trends, maybe not the best communication styles, or a very like misunderstood or sharp communication style. And you will also notice who these individuals beef with, and that's usually a dead giveaway of whether or not they're masculine dominant or feminine dominant. So Melissa Gorga, Housewives of New Jersey, this one's pretty obvious. Your girl Tay Tay. I'm sorry, her energy does not give feminine dominant, it gives masculine dominant. And you can tell by her shrewd business tactics how much she leans more toward that masculine side. Tawanda Braxton, and it's what's interesting about Tawanda is she's the only one out of the Braxton sisters that I could confidently say I feel is masculine dominant. Trina was like a tweener, but Tawanda's the one. Are you seeing the trend yet? I'm gonna give you more. Are you getting it? Are you seeing it in them? All three of these people, actually, if we really want to get into it, all three of them are masculine dominant. The majority of these women are strikingly beautiful. That is the thing that people don't realize. And a lot of times, masculine dominant men are very attracted to these kinds of women because of that aesthetic and their approach to femininity. And then when they get in relationships with them, they find that they're not getting the nurturing that they're really looking for, because what they don't understand is that soft feminine aspect of who these women truly are. It doesn't come naturally to masculine dominant women, and that's why they beef with feminine dominant women like Kenya and Nene, or Kenya and Portia, or Kenya and insert everybody else that we've ever seen on the show. This is also a reason why a lot of these women, when they get into fights with other feminines, they will go for your looks, or they will go for something superficial. I see this amongst the Braxton sisters. We've obviously seen this amongst these two. This is why Kylie would say that Kendall was her biggest bully, and Kim was always coming and clocking for people. It's also important to see that a lot of these women do have a sense of inflated confidence because they do get that attention from a lot of different kinds of men. And if they're not in a relationship where it is more balanced, like let's say that they're in a relationship with a feminine dominant man, I would say Melissa Gorga is one of those examples. I feel like her relationship with her husband works because Joe is feminine dominant, but they still sort of play their individual human roles, if that makes sense. And there is a sense of balance between these two. Could be why this one struggles to find a balance or strike a balance in her relationships. Or this one. Allegedly. Oh, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Both Beyonce and Rihanna resonate as feminine, but one embodies light femininity while the other embodies dark femininity. And in this video, we're going to get into the difference between dark femininity and masculine dominant women. Light feminines are driven by intuition. Dark feminines are driven by passion. Both are divine. Both are emotional. Both are feminine. A light feminine may come off more graceful or soft, pure, receptive, empathetic, while the dark feminine may come off more transformational or passionate, seductive, creative, fierce. This is one of the reasons why Beyonce created Sasha Fierce. The difference between light femininity and dark femininity is just like being on the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. The light energy is what people normally associate with that particular polarity, and the dark energy just exists somewhere in the deep end. Both feminine, both watery, both masculine. We have light masculine and dark masculine. Light masculines are driven by achievement. Dark masculines are driven by power. Both can be light and vibrational. Both can also be wounded. And the same goes for light feminines and dark feminines. Wounding for light feminines may look like self-sacrifice or being passive. Wounding for dark feminines may come off like aggression or lacking receptivity. Wounding for light masculines may look like arrogance or being boastful or prideful. Wounding for dark masculines who are driven by power may be intimidation, manipulation, or anger. And everyone dips in and out of being in their light energy and in their dark energy. So a lot of times when people look up these energies on Pinterest or whatever, you see like a mood board of how you should dress or your look if you're a light or a dark feminine. And it's all rubbish. You're going to be one way in certain stages of your life and another way in other stages. However, masculine dominant feminines are still masculine in nature because they're driven by achievement. And one time for that look, or power. Whereas feminine dominant men are still feminine in nature because they're either driven by what they perceive as their intuition or how they're being guided or their creative gift. Feminine dominant masculines can be toxic. Masculine dominant masculines can be toxic. Feminine dominant women can be toxic. Masculine dominant women can be toxic. However, these two women, the dark feminine and the masculine dominant woman, are not the same. One is still driven by emotions, passion, intuition, feeling, and one is still driven by power, authority, status, achievement.
At the top of this video, I just want to start off by saying that these are all my energetic opinions. You can feel free to take my opinions as correct, but they're just opinions for those who like to get litigious. I think that's what it is. Legalities, litigious, whatever. Upon impact as a human being, you're immediately traumatized, but you're also immediately being separated from your feminine energy. And this happens to all of us. We get a little bit of time to be crybabies, and then we need to start suppressing our emotions. We need to start being money-based and money-focused. We need to start seeking perfection because that is what our society is telling us is going to get us what we want, and we need to start performing. Because of this, the way that certain feminines can come across while in a wounded state can make it seem like they are perhaps masculine dominant or something of the sort, but it's actually just wounded feminine rage. And so this list of people are women who feminine energies or their feminine dominantness is sometimes lost under certain layers of wounding and what that can look like. So the biggest thief of feminine energy is perfection seeking because it is inherently masculine. Masculine energy is task oriented, start, finish, accomplish. And so when you're dropped into a society that is forcing you to try to seek perfection in order to receive love, which is what all feminines are trying to seek, it can create a sense of hatefulness or bitterness or jealousy, and it creates codependency because it makes you a slave to whatever external means you need validation from, and that's typically men. So you will see some of the most remarkable, powerful, beautiful, feminine women applying the tool or the rule of perfection to every area of their life, and they will be achieving in those areas because a lot of times society will reward you, especially materially, if you are perfect, but it somehow doesn't translate into their love lives. And so this can create either blocks in your throat chakra where you don't speak your truth, where you're afraid to speak your truth because you don't want to lose love, or you become angry and combative. Because really what you're doing is you're eroding your self-esteem in order to receive outside validation. There is a deep sense of self-confidence wounding in these kinds of feminines. Because despite the fact that they achieve perfection over and over and over and over again, there is still this sense of powerlessness of it all, because that goalpost can change at any point because you're usually leaving it in a masculine's hands. So you can become very fear-based and very isolated. You could start to lack a trust in your own judgment or your own ability to make the correct decisions that you need to make in your life. You can become very depressed because you do make decisions from a fearful state because you are seeking that love. So sometimes those decisions are just pure judgment, and so that increases the lack of trust you feel within yourself. And because you're constantly trying to prove something outside of yourself, you can just become a very combative person to deal with, very competitive, almost kind of cynical, almost sort of aggressively materialistic. You really want to show how well you treat your man, because you're trying to prove to them just how perfect you are, which then can make you hypercritical of other people because you're subconsciously measuring them up against the same strict rule of thumb of perfection that you've adopted within yourself, because you're separated from your inner feminine core that is your true regulator of your sense of self-worth. And if a feminine doesn't do the work to get out of this place, to rise into her divine femininity, a lot of times they will cling to the delusions and the illusions that they've created around their life, and they will not let them go. Reality becomes too painful because they haven't created that safe home within themselves that every person needs, but particularly feminines have the propensity to create this and harvest this before anyone else has, because we have that direct link. But when you're feminine dominant and you're wounded and you're placing your sense of worth outside of yourself, this is what it can look like. This is how it shows up. And if you're wondering why you don't see Nikki on this list when you would have, it's because she's getting her own video. So let me know your thoughts in the comments.
There is a unique experience amongst divine feminine women that is not talked about enough, and it's an experience that I can speak to from a deep personal level, and that is of the isolated feminine. There is a misconception that in order to be feminine, you cannot also be sharp and precise and highly analytical. And you also shouldn't be displaying any form of aggression like rage or wrath, but that is just simply untrue. When energies become in balance, we can all display these things and we can all have these feelings inwardly. But the way that we show up in the world and how we feel internally can sometimes look different and be different. In this case, I believe that Nicki Minaj is one of those divine feminines, and I feel like her shadow traits are aligned with the shadow traits of the isolated feminine that I have even dealt with personally. The creativity and passion that oozes from this kind of feminine is intrinsic. It is built within their DNA, and if you believe that everybody comes here to have a soul's purpose and a divine mission, it is my belief that Nicki Minaj was put here to display what true feminine rage looks like and what true feminine mastery of a certain art form looks like. Naturally analytical, resourceful, self-reliant, very observant, deep thinking, and very keen listening and always actually paying attention to what you're saying. But because they're inherently feminine internally, they come off as a natural mother to people often. And Nicki Minaj has always had a natural mothering sense. And that's one of the biggest reasons why her fan base is so deeply attached to her, because it truly is like a mother-child dynamic. And that's not in a shady way. That is in a way where you feel taken care of and safe in this person's presence. That's why she elicits that kind of reaction. When you're younger, you start to display these traits earlier, and you might always be sort of different from your peers or set aside from your peers. Your peers come to you for advice. You feel very protective over your circle of friends, and you come off really empathetic. Your passions are usually displayed creatively early on at this point, which leads to you just being naturally innovative. And you become as patient with yourself as you are with your friends that come to you. This is the kind of person that Nicki Minaj strikes me as her core. But with innovation comes attention, and so she naturally can turn that on and be extroverted. But I feel that she's actually very introverted as a person, and it really comes out in a lot of the deep cuts on her album. Constantly functioning that highly, and at the same time being brutally scrutinized based on how you show up in the world and however your skin suit is. And it becomes increasingly isolating because you're always driven by this drive that you have that you can't turn off, and it separates you more and more and more and more from other people. And I think in Nicki's case, being in the field that she's in rap, that is heavily toxic masculine, has created a persona and a way of being that is aligned with that field. When in a shadow place, this kind of feminine can be very reclusive, can get very cold, dismissive, depressed, disillusioned, complete blind rage, be hypervigilant and hyperprotective of themselves and the people that they care about. Because at the end of the day, they value privacy and they value the ability to grow and change within yourself and have that time to yourself and show up and be able to give the world your gifts and then go away. But that's not how life works. And so these kinds of feminines constantly struggle with what is expected of you in life. I think that her field also makes it difficult for her to actually show real empathy when it is so separate from what it is that she's supposed to be doing. Not that that's an excuse for anything dark or, allegedly that she has done, but just to let you know that you can show up wounded no matter how highly you vibrate or not. I think that she also struggles with setting strong personal boundaries, which is something that I had an issue with, especially with people that you love a lot and actually taking the time to take care of herself.
If you've made it to this point in the video, then my hope is that you enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Consider subscribing to this channel or give this video a like, as it will help me greatly in the algorithm. My name is Chinez and welcome to my channel. At the time of this recording, you can still connect with me on TikTok at Chinez, Chinez. You can also connect with me on Instagram at official Chinez. Check out my website. I offer personal tarot spiritual readings, and you can find information on that in the pinned comment and in the description box. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode.